Welcome. As someone who's been reading fantasy for about 25 years, I have read thousands of books. All the way through high school, college, even in adulthood, I've always read a lot of books. So for me personally, I wouldn't call myself a beginner. But here are 5 books that I think are really good for people just getting into fantasy. Now, as someone who has a decent sized audience on Instagram, I do get a lot of people coming in asking for recommendations who are not part of the book community. And in all honesty, it's one of my favorite questions to get in my DMs. I love looking back on things that I've read and thinking, man, if I would have just found this earlier in life. And I'm hoping to find that for people. I love to help people find that book that really makes everything click and makes them into a reader. Because yes, followers are fun, subscribers here are great, and likes do feel good, but nothing feels better than finding a book that just works for someone. That's my high. That's what makes me want to keep going. And that's what I love about my page on Instagram because I get to do that over and over again. I'm going to do my best to mix it up here. A lot of times I see this list, I see Red Rising, I see Mistborn. Those are like the two main go-tos. They're great books. I love the Red Rising series. I love the Mistborn series. Let's look at some books that you're not going to see on every list that I think are great places for new readers to start. Let's jump right into the deep end with Joe Abercrombie's new book, The Devils. Now, this may feel like an interesting pick when the first law is already there. I could throw someone into that. And me personally, yes, I like the first law better than I like the Devils. But the Devils is a book that's very easy to get into. I can see myself recommending this to someone like my dad and saying, hey, read this, and he would be satisfied with this. The first law as a series is slow. That plot builds. The world has to fill in around you. Whereas with the Devils, I feel like you're right into it. The characters build up quickly, the plot is understood, and the action is right off the bat. This is going to be a much easier place, I feel like, for someone coming into fantasy or even just jumping into Joe Abercrombie for the first time. This would be the book that I would point them to just because it's so much more accessible. And honestly, I think it's written like that. There's nothing wrong with that, right? If you want deeper, if you want more detailed Joe Abercrombie, you have the first law. But for someone who's new to fantasy or new to Joe Abercrombie, I think The Devils is a fantastic place to start. I don't think you can go wrong with this one. And you know what? If it doesn't work, we have some other options coming up. Then I got An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is a little YA. Yes, this is a little romancy. But to be honest, a lot of people asking to get into a more classic fantasy feel or an epic fantasy feel are people coming from the romantasy space who are coming to me and asking for recommendations. I think this is a great stepping stone from that romantasy or contemporary romance world into the epic fantasy world. Sabaa does it so well here, and this series as a whole, the 4 books, are just fantastic all around. Character arcs are great. This book has some of my favorite female characters in it, and the story on top of that is very, very intriguing as well. I think this book casts a really wide net. Whether this person's new to fantasy or coming from the romance or romantasy world, this is going to grab them. You feel satisfied after one book, but you're begging for more, and that's there for you if you want it. I think this is a great stepping stone for someone starting to read fantasy or jumping from one genre to another. An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. If you haven't read it and you are a fantasy fan, I would recommend this because it is much better than you think it is. Next up, I got Ascendant by Michael R. Miller. A lot of people around my age, that millennial age, are people who have read Aragon or know about Aragon. While I love Aragon, it doesn't really grow up until Murtagh, which at that point is the 5th book. I feel like Michael with Ascendant has taken the spirit of Aragon and turned it into a book more suitable for an older reading age. While it's your classic Dragon Rider book and it feels like that, and you're still going to feel that joy you had when you were younger reading Aragon, there are much more adult themes as the series goes on. I will say Michael does a great job easing you into it as well. This first book is smooth. You're going to understand the plot. You're going to understand the action. You're going to be connected to the characters. But as this series goes on, it gets stronger and stronger and heavier when it comes to the themes. And I think it's something that's really easy to ease yourself into. So a lot of times when people come to me and ask for recommendations, if they're wanting to get into fantasy, I'll ask what they read as kids. A lot of guys say Aragon. And this is such an easy crossover from Aragon to Ascendant. I think Michael Miller does a great job. The 4th book is coming out soon, and I've enjoyed all of them. Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. I love Michael J. Sullivan's universe. I love that it's so accessible no matter where you jump in, and I think there's something there for everybody. This series and Michael J. Sullivan's works as a whole can be as deep or as surface level as you want them to be. You can just read this book and be happy. You don't have to go into his other series, but if you do, if you connect with this book like I did back in 2013, you love Royce and Hadrian. This world has grabbed you, it's pulled you in, you want to know more about it, you want to explore it more. Michael has that there. There's a lot of books to choose from where you can jump in. For me, publication order is the best way to go with this. I think stuff is revealed better that way, and there's so much to explore and Easter eggs to call back on as you're going through the series. But Theft of Swords is just a great place for anyone to jump in. Michael does such a great job giving us a classic fantasy book with a really modern feel and something that's easy to read. I feel like a lot of people are intimidated by big epic fantasy books, and this is just a great example of why you don't need to be intimidated. These books are really easy to jump into. You're going to feel pulled in after the first 10 pages or so, and that's what you want for someone who's new to fantasy or someone who's trying to get into reading. You want them to feel like the time that they put in is being paid off. And I think with Royce and Hadrian, this bromance here, this team up in this world and this book, I think the payoff is fantastic. Again, it can be as little or as much as you want. Michael's got a ton of stuff there for you to read, and it all starts right here. And of course, I got to talk about my boy Kip in the Lightbringer series, starting with the Black Prism from Brent Weeks. I like to point people towards the Black Prism because I think it's a great introduction to magic systems. The color-based magic system in here is really robust and something fun to sink your teeth into, but it's a low barrier for entry. It makes sense to us how colors work. The comparison between colors or luxins and what they do in this book just makes sense. And the way that it works within the world plays out so beautifully throughout the 5 books and the plot. Everything you learn throughout the first book is really important as we move on through the series, but I feel like this first book just makes it very easy to jump right into epic fantasy. Not only does this book have one of my favorite main character arcs across fantasy with Kip, even though that magic system is pretty straightforward and makes sense most of the time, it's still one of my favorites of all time. Brent did a great job giving us a broken, unconfident character, and watching him grow and build up through this series is just so fantastic. And it is so easy to get sucked into Kip and his mind and watching how he just changes as a person throughout this whole book. It's one of my favorite coming of age stories of all time and such an easy place to jump into epic fantasy and feel like you're getting your money's worth and feel like your time is being paid off. Lightbringer from Brent Weeks is one of my favorite series, and again, one of those that I love pointing people to if they're new to fantasy or just trying to get more into epic fantasy. Well, I hope that was somewhat helpful and a little different from just the normal Red Rising or Mistborn recommendations. That's really what I like to try to do on my Instagram, whether it be indie books or books that just aren't talked about much anymore. I like to bring those back up because these books from 10, 15, 20 years ago still hold up really well today. And I think personally are great places to jump into fantasy and just get a taste. We got something old, we got something new, and I guess this one's a little bit blue, but yeah. These are all great places to start in fantasy. They're places that I point people to and stuff you don't see a ton of content for. Yes, is my long-term goal to get more content on books that I love from 15 years ago? Probably. But I also just want people to start reading more. If you made it this far, please remember to subscribe. I'd love a comment for you. I'd love you to come check me out on Instagram. And yeah, keep reading.